There's a lot of talk going around about industry plants, and just to put it out there, I believe they exist. I truly think there are people whose popularity and existence is due to the fact that they have literally been imposed on the general public. What do I mean? The trajectory of artists and people who eventually become public personalities starts off with them being found, so to speak, in general obscurity in places that they used to frequent that were niche hubs of whatever they do. So a fine artist will be doing their thing in their particular artistic spaces and will be quote-unquote discovered by a gallery that sees the cultural value of their work and get a residency, and before you know it, they're traveling the world, and what they were formerly doing as an act of insurrectionary art now has commercial currency, and they become a part of the capitalist machine in a more conventional sense. Take for instance somebody like an Ayanda Mapulu, whose work was literally being banned and is now using the same work, thematics, meaning, and politics to become a successful artist. This is how the capitalist wheel spins. You become unpopular up until the value of your unpopularity is popular. In other words, even if your work is made in the spirit of dissent, if it can be sold as that, then it is valuable to the very same thing you are dissenting against. I know, it's ironic, but that's just how meticulous capitalism is. Even if your work claims to be anti-capitalist, if it uses aesthetics that neatly fit into what people are used to, it becomes the quote-unquote anti-capitalist image of what capitalism uses to sell itself. So therefore, there are rappers who have made their way into the scene, and there's a lot of people who are calling them out as industry plants. I want to speak about an artist who I definitely think is an industry plant, using their latest album. BigStar Johnson was literally given to us as the winner of a reality TV show framed around finding the ultimate rapper. If that doesn't sound industry planty, I don't know what is. Instead of scouts, A&Rs, or whatever you want to call them, actively seeking out talent in the underground, they orchestrate a competition that brings the talent out to compete where they'll be chosen according to certain standards. Now ask yourself, what are those standards? So if you tend to be a fan or have followed any musical reality TV show, you'll realize that the standards of how they choose the ultimate winner of the formula of popularity. And the formula of popularity is always changing according to its aesthetic guise. So if you tend to fit into that contemporary framework of what can easily be sold, you are most likely to make it into the top tier of whatever program that is. And that is exactly how BigStar Johnson came to us. He came as the recipient of a process which judged him according to just how similar he was to what already existed. And I think this is a reason why when reality TV show winners have to actually make good music, they dwindle and they die quickly. Quicker than people who've had to actually work for the stardom. And I don't say this in any dismissive way, I'm just being real. If you want a reality TV show, you win under the cusp of sticking to the formulaic principles that had you win in the first place. But if you're an artist who worked hard to have their identity understood by whoever is in charge of the business of your music, you're giving more leg room to experiment around what you feel is the impulse of where you want to go. And this is not saying artists like BigStar Johnson don't get the room to breathe. They just don't get enough space. Because again, this ominous cloud of expectation hangs over them in a way that they cannot escape. You can't just go from being the winner of a reality TV show to extracting yourself from all of the cliches that are expected from that. You embody those cliches. You won because of those cliches. But unfortunately, cliches don't make good art. They make for a safe product. And I think this is why, for the most part, reality TV show winners have not been able to crack something beyond the typical. Because they've chosen by virtue of how safe their art is. So when BigStar Johnson releases his debut album, it doesn't hit because the bars, the beats are all settled under an atmosphere that pretty much doesn't allow for him as an artist to stick out. Same thing with Shane Eagle, somebody who was on the same reality TV show as a runner-up, and mind you, struggles from the same kind of nightmarish legacy. These are artists who, even though they might in their own personal capacity be trying to leap outside of what was given to them as the groundworks for their success, they cannot, because public perception has already been set. In other words, when you're planted in a certain soil by the industry, you can't pluck yourself out. So what are you saying, VJ? Is Shane Eagle and BigStar Johnson industry plants? Like, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because fundamentally, this idea of an industry plant is seen from a conspiracy theory lens of artists who are given to us to sell some kind of nefarious image of the devil, or it's some Christian idea of people trying to lead us. Now, come on. The truth is, if you're popular, you are feeding the capitalist machine. But there are two kinds of popularity. One that arises organically from the sheer novelty of what you do, and one that is manufactured by an industry seeking to replicate the success of a certain product. And that is the industry plant. The industry plant is the construct of brands and corporate media who try to create their own version of what they understand youth culture to be in at the moment. So as a result, industry plants tend to be people whose rise to the top tier wasn't due to the fact that they actually amassed a following that brought them there. It is because they were found by certain people who saw the potential for them to become the new look and image of something which was already billable, already lucrative. So again, BigStar Johnson was taken from wherever he was, made into a superstar, pushed into the open window of the industry, and expected to succeed because he ticked all the boxes of what a rapper is supposed to look like, sound like, write like, walk like, etc., etc. And that's exactly why he isn't a good rapper. Because he won based on the idea of what a good rapper is supposed to be. And what the industry doesn't understand is the standards are always shifting. And they don't shift in the climate of the commercial scene. They're out there in the actual culture. The idea of what a rapper is not some stagnant thing that is in the same place that you can just always replicate. It's a shifting phenomenon based on what rappers are experiencing and what the culture is going through right now. So you cannot manufacture a star. They arise by the sheer organic impulse of the times. And that is why industry plants are always so obvious to spot. Because they're so desperate to sound like what works that they become buried in an obnoxious haze of frustrating typicality, which exemplifies BigStar Johnson's latest album, Caesar, which he dedicated to the memory of his father. And I feel bad for throwing such sentimental value alongside the politics of BigStar being a plant, because the truth is, behind the business and the industry and however he might have come to the foreground, he's a person with feelings and with ideas that come from a place that is intensely and insanely personal. And I appreciate this project because it is a walk through some of the deeper aspects of who this dude really is. It is sidestepping into moments of tragedy, jumping into how he feels about past failures, not really making it when he was expected to make it. You know, in other words, Caesar is a testament of what it feels like to be a failed project, to be the experiment that all the scientists around you were betting would revolutionize their idea and their formula, and to fall flat on the ground and find your identity in the aftermath of that. So let's go into the album. Caesar is 13 songs of regular beats with regularized hooks and a regular approach to songwriting and a regular impulse for what works. I think one of the things that distinguished BigStar and Shane is at least Shane Eagle has learned the craftsmanship of voice dynamics. I do not have any issues with the way Shane Eagle projects his rhymes, but I have many issues with the way that BigStar Johnson raps. He's a great rapper on paper, literally. If you were to take his lines and transcript them, they're pretty impressive. He's able to swiftly move from a mode that is deeply personal and do it in ways that the referencing is pop jargon, the dialogue is simple enough to be understood by a general mass, it's witty enough, it carries enough oomph to push and kind of become something of a bravado. But the way he sounds while saying all of these impressive lines just brings the atmosphere of his projects down to insane notches below the expectation. The brother has this monotone register which doesn't allow for the emotions to come alive. I mean, even on songs like Understand, which is supposed to be like an intimate neo-soul-esque vibe, he just sounds so dreary and recited that nothing of the words actually bonds to the listener. And I think this is BigStar Johnson's main weakness as a rapper. He knows how to write, but he doesn't know how to rap. He doesn't know how to sound. He doesn't know how to capture the spoken word frequency of the energy of his words and match them to the vibrations that the words are trying to capture. He raps in the same way a slam poet would. He tries to carry these words with a kind of cliche thrust that doesn't allow for them to sound like words that come from a real place in his heart. So as a result, this album is not only underwhelmingly disappointing to listen to on a sonic level because it doesn't bridge beyond anything typical, it's underwhelming on a vocal level because BigStar Johnson hasn't really honed the dynamics of his voice. And it's a shame because you could tell it's a broad voice, it's a deep voice. He has tones where he could genuinely sing his own choruses. He has moments where he could leap from a register which is lower and kind of go into a more softer tone. But he doesn't allow that to be captured in a way that, for the lack of a better word, sounds human. It's listening to a rapping machine that sounds like an AI doing a really great impression of a good rapper. And so ultimately, sentiment aside, the artistic value of this project is diminished by the fact that the artist does not understand their own vocal dynamics and that the production doesn't seek to attain some kind of novelty to its backing. So all in all, this is yet another failure for BigStar Johnson, and I think what would be good for him to reflect on more than anything else is stripping the production bare and returning to a place that challenges his own vocal dynamics. I mean, to give a pure, apt example, Pretty Ugly went from rapping in a nasal tone that always sounded like he's trying to become some kind of playboy, an obnoxious tone, to developing a register that still had that flex and that boom bap energy, but carried to it a level of sincerity. And that is it. BigStar Johnson has no sincerity in his voice. He might have it in his heart, he just hasn't learned to translate it vocally. So all in all, he keeps being given or somehow choosing beats that are safe enough to pass in the commercial airplay. But this again is one of the faux pas, if you will, that don't allow him to cross to any kind of real potential. So my simple advice to BigStar Johnson is jump and leap to a scary artistic place. Go where you haven't heard any artists go before. Stop being safe. Stop being white bread. Stop being acceptable. Be rebellious. Resurrect yourself outside of the manufactured expectations that you were designed to fulfill. Transplant yourself out of your industry plantness, which means losing everything in terms of the machine that he's probably still backed by. But it means gaining a sense of artistic opportunity to actually become something genuine. Ultimately for me, this project is a 3 out of 10. It is nothing to add culturally, it has nothing to add lyrically, it has nothing to add vocally, it has nothing to add aesthetically, it has nothing to add creatively. All in all, it feels like a knockoff of what every other rap artist right now is trying to do, with all the bells and whistles of the expected features. You have artists right now whose trajectories are more successful than BigStar, backing BigStar, the Younger Chiefs, the Stinoli Twainies, so forth, Rouge, the list is endless. The industry plant is backed by the power of popularity. But the truth is, being around people who are relatively successful doesn't make you successful. Having them on your songs, having the clout of rubbing shoulders and being around them can only buy you the access of being in the space, but you've got to prove your worth when you're there. And I think if the story of BigStar Johnson is going to go anywhere that doesn't feel like the designated path of a robot, which simply is the rubbish bin for the next update, he better free himself from all of the shackles, which ironically are the reasons he's still able to garner artists of some level of influence around his project. BigStar Johnson needs to start again as a nobody, so that he can prove that he's actually somebody, not something which was made for us to pay attention to. My name is VJ, the brother from the ancient mother, and one of the beautiful things about critical theory is we're able to assess the value of art on a cultural level and see the difference between the kind of art that is mass-produced only to become some kind of taste-making scheme to sell people products, and the kind of art which comes from the genuine place where the people reside and attempts to work with their emotions. And sometimes I have the beautiful honor of reviewing projects that are right in the middle of that have the capitalist buy-in but come from an artist smart enough to understand how to wiggle something actually significant into the air of the people. BigStar Johnson has the platform, but he does not have the ingenuity and the originality to do that. And that is the end of it.